At exactly 1:18 hours, the English Channel was a sheet of black glass. A Russian oil tanker, the Smeirtos, plowed forward at a lazy commercial speed, running every light a law-abiding merchant ship should run. 40 meters astern, two Royal Navy RHIBs cut the water in total darkness. Aboard them, a special boat service team, Britain's elite maritime commandos, closed in for a non-compliant boarding. Every man knew the value of what might be inside that hull. A single sanctioned tanker can move over $50 million of crude in one run. This was supposed to be a routine inspection of a suspicious vessel in international waters. Then the tanker did something no oil tanker is built to do. At 1:26 hours, huge sections of the Smeirtos hull swung outward like the doors of a hangar. Mechanical launch rails dropped to the waterline. 8 high-speed assault boats roared out of the ship's belly and slammed into the sea, throwing long white scars of foam across the channel. In that instant, the hunters became the hunted, because boarding a tanker is the easy part. The question is what's waiting inside. To understand why a commercial tanker just opened fire, you have to understand the gray zone, that murky space between peace and open war, where a hostile power strikes without ever firing a shot it can be blamed for. For years, a shadow fleet of aging tankers has crisscrossed the world's shipping lanes, flying flags of convenience, switching transponders off, blending into the thousands of legitimate hulls that move global trade every single day. NATO knew some of these ships were more than they appeared. The problem was proof. In international waters, suspicion isn't an arrest warrant. The Smeirtos was the answer to a strategic riddle. Why risk a warship when you can hide a weapons platform inside a vessel nobody is legally allowed to touch? This is asymmetric warfare in its purest form, turning the enemy's own rules of engagement into a cage. Beneath that rusted commercial skin sat a fully integrated swarm system. 8 fast attack boats, a dozen loitering drones, and an electronic warfare suite built to blind anyone who came close. Each assault boat carried Igla-S man pads, shoulder-launched surface-to-air missiles with a reach past 5 kilometers. Moscow's planners were confident. They had engineered a saturation kill box and baited it with the one target Britain couldn't resist boarding. The board was set, the trap was sprung, and the Smeirtos was waiting for someone to get close. At 1:39 hours, the trap closed. The 8 assault boats fanned out and accelerated to full throttle, carving in at the 2 RHIBs from every bearing at once. The SBS Commandos abandoned the boarding instantly and broke into evasive maneuvers, but there was no clean water left to run to. Every turn they made opened a new angle for someone else. Then the Smeirtos opened a second set of hidden bays. Roughly 12 loitering drones lifted off the deck in a single coordinated wave, banked hard, and dove toward the British boats. Now the SBS was pinned in 3 dimensions. Fast boats slicing in at sea level, a drone swarm pressing down from above. This is where the real nightmare begins. Trailing in the dark, a Royal Navy Type 26 frigate held contact with the team. Its combat system locked target after target, but it could not fire. The assault boats had laced themselves so tightly through the SBS formation that there was no safe corridor, no shot that didn't risk killing the men it was meant to save. With every passing minute, the noose drew tighter, the drone contacts multiplying across the tactical display like a spreading stain. At 1:50 hours, the first A-10 Thunderbolt IIs finally tore through the low cloud and rolled in over the engagement zone, diverted at full burn from a nearby NATO exercise. The A-10 is built around a single weapon, the GAU-8/A Avenger, a 30mm rotary cannon that spits depleted uranium rounds at nearly 4,000 a minute. Think of a fire hose that shreds steel. But even the hand of God needs a clear line of fire. The enemy boats had pressed in so close to the SBS that the pilots could see the targets and still couldn't pull the trigger. Friend and foe were bleeding into the same patch of black water. The Americans circled, hunting for a gap that wasn't there, while below them, the ambush force kept squeezing. For now, the trap still held. Put yourself in the cockpit of that lead A-10. If you were the pilot, would you A, take the high-risk gun pass and accept the chance of friendly fire, or B, hold fire and wait for a cleaner corridor while your allies get swarmed? Comment below, A or B. At 0201 hours, the ambush force changed the game. A cluster of assault boats peeled off and charged straight into the SBS, deliberately collapsing the distance until Allied and enemy hulls were nearly intermingled in the same field of view. It wasn't a mistake, it was tactics. They were using the Commandos as human shields against the aircraft above. Then the launch bays on the boats snapped open and the Igla-S man pads came alive. A flash split the darkness. Missiles leapt off the sea surface and streaked upward, riding the heat signatures of the orbiting A-10s. The formation reacted on pure instinct and training, breaking apart, punching out flares, hauling into hard evasive turns. One jet banked savagely left, another stood on its tail and clawed for altitude to break the lock. The Igla is a fire-and-forget infrared seeker. Once it has your heat, it doesn't get bored. The only answers are flares and violence. The sky over the channel became a strobing tangle of pursuit and evasion, missile plumes, flare trails, and drones now diving into the same crowded corridor. This is the human element the enemy never accounts for. No panic on the radio, just clipped, disciplined calls as American pilots flew their way out of a textbook ambush. At 2:07 hours, with the man-pad's threat thinning, the A-10s reached for the AGM-65 Maverick, a precision air-to-ground missile that locks a target and flies itself in. But every firing corridor evaporated the instant it opened. The targets kept sliding back and forth across the line between friendly and hostile, and a Maverick doesn't ask who it's hitting. The pilots held their shots again and again, refusing to trade a kill for a comrade. Below, the boat fleet kept tightening the ring. Above, the Air Force sent in to stabilize the situation was instead fighting just to survive inside a tactical space that was folding in on itself. Air, surface, and the closing swarm were all collapsing into one narrow kill box, and the Smeirtos, untouched, still had cards left to play. Do you believe in the discipline of NATO air crews under fire? If so, drop a 1 in the comments. As its man-pads boats burned on the surface, the Smeirtos shifted to a layer no gun could reach. Beneath the deck, electronic warfare modules powered up in unison and flooded the entire engagement zone with jamming pulses. At 2:15 hours, the Type 26's screens began to stutter. The SBS track split in two, then jumped off its true position. The auto-lock system grabbed targets and lost them, grabbed and lost. A cascade of red alerts strobing through the operations room. On the A-10s, HUD navigation symbols flickered and lied. One pilot pulled up hard when his target data drifted off the real world. Another dropped to raw data mode just to keep flying. The boats exploited every glitch, knifing dozens of meters deeper into the formation with each false ghost on the screen. This was a digital hallucination, the Smeirtos painting phantoms across every sensor at once. At 2:21 hours, the answer arrived. An EA-18G Growler, pulled from the same NATO exercise, dove into the jamming and lit up its full electronic scanning suite. The Growler is a digital god of war. It doesn't dodge interference, it eats it, reconstructing the enemy's emission map and feeding the jamming straight back to its source. Within seconds, it peeled apart the overlapping signals and locked the primary emitter. The Smeirtos fought back, the locked signal vanished, then reappeared at a dozen false positions, dragging the analysis off course. The Growler chased it band by band as the emission cluster fragmented across the spectrum until the tracking loop finally tightened and pinned the real source in place. But before the suppression beam could finish it, the Smeirtos fired one last encoded pulse, a single bright heartbeat that cut through the murk, then steered off toward open sea and dropped clean off every screen. At 2:33 hours, the threat went deep. The Type 26's sonar bloomed with underwater tracks, accelerating straight at the formation, cutting through the water like spears. A Merlin HM-2 helicopter launched off the deck and rained sonobuoys in a tightening pattern. The contacts split and merged, hunting for a seam. Air, surface, and the deep were now folding into a single choke point, and the SBS was still in the middle of it. By 2:44 hours, the Smeirtos had spent its swarm, and that was the mistake the West was waiting for. Stripped of its boats and its electronic phantoms, the tanker pulled everything that was left into one last defensive shell. The antenna arrays, the communication modules, the swarm coordination gear still feeding orders to the boats, and drones scattered across the channel. It had nowhere left to hide them. With the jamming broken, those emitters lit up the deck like a runway. The A-10s dropped low and went to work, not with the gun this time, but with the Maverick. The squadron locked each target in cold sequence, the forward communications cluster first, then the central sensor array, then the exposed control gear running the length of the upper structure. One by one, the missiles left the rails and flew themselves in on flat, patient flight paths. The impacts walked across the Smeirtos deck in a chain of fire. This wasn't a barrage with a E, it was a lobotomy, each strike severing another nerve between the brain and the body. And out across the water, the body died. On the tactical screens, the assault boats faltered first, their signals stuttering as the command link dissolved. The drones lost synchronization, broke formation, and drifted off their headings like a flock that had lost the sky. With no orders and no coordination, the entire ambush force came apart in the middle of its own attack. 12 drones and 8 boats, reduced to titanium confetti and dead metal, drifting on the tide. By 2:58 hours, the Smeirtos was completely isolated, no data out, no response from within. The ship that had nearly swallowed an SBS team now wallowed through the channel like a corpse that had lost every system keeping it alive. The pride of a shadow fleet had been broken by the overwhelming technology of the West. They'd shown their hand, and the U.S. Navy showed them a royal flush. The Type 26 moved into a control position, the SBS re-established its perimeter, boarded the hull, sealed the technical spaces, and took the ship under tow toward a British military port. The trap had finally closed on the trappers. The cost ledger was lopsided. The ambush force lost everything: 8 assault boats, 12 drones, and an entire integrated weapons suite, all reduced to scrap on the tide. The SBS came through battered but intact. Not a single commando was lost, and not one aircraft fell. The Smeirtos itself was taken whole. The data pulled from its undamaged modules told the real story. This was no oil tanker. It was a swarm-carrying platform engineered to hide inside the everyday traffic of an international shipping lane and strike from behind a commercial disguise. The strategic lesson is brutally simple. In the gray zone, the deadliest weapon isn't the missile, it's the mask, and the West just learned to see through it. If one fake tanker carried all that, how many more are out there right now running dark on the world's shipping lanes? Tell us in the comments. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a deck. The sensors are hot, the board is set. Stay sharp and keep your eyes on the horizon. We'll see you on the next one. This is a fictional dramatization created for analysis and entertainment. It does not depict real events.